Welcome to another episode of On the History Trail. I'm your host and tour guide, Mark Nonestied. We're standing at Journal Square, right across the street from the magnificent Loews Theater that was built in 1929. And on today's episode, we're going to go inside and take a look at this grand old theater. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Mark.
I'm with Patty Jordan, who's the president of the Friends of the Loews, and we're here in the lobby of the Loew Cinema. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of this building?
Sure. The Loews was built in 1929. The plans began to be prepared in 1927, and when the jazz singer came out, they went back to the drawing board and equipped this theater for sound, so it opened up as an all-talkie house. September 28, 1929.
Great.
A month before the stock market crash.
And it's really, architecturally, it's really impressive. I mean, it looks like something out of the Italian Renaissance, some famous opera house we'd expect to see in Europe. Why is that?
Well, back in the old days, all the studios, or the men who owned the studios, also owned theaters. And there was fierce competition between Loews and Warner Brothers and all of the others. So they built the best, and they always were competing to build the best. So
going to the movies was somewhat of an experience in and of itself then.
Absolutely. Marcus Loew said, and the quote is, "I don't sell tickets to movies, I sell tickets to theaters." And that was his philosophy.
Yeah, and we can certainly see that in the architecture of this place. So how many seats are in this theater?
Originally, there were 3,186 seats. Through the years, they partitioned it, made it into 3 theaters. And then with our own volunteers, we took out those partition walls. When we're complete, we think we'll have about 2,900 seats back in.
So how does this compare to other theaters in the area?
Well, movie palaces were a special class of movie theater. There were hundreds of them throughout the United States. We're down to a couple of hundred, as opposed to many hundred of them in the country. And in this area, there aren't that many. In New Jersey, this is probably the only movie palace left.
Okay, so these types of movie palaces, they would have started to fall out of favor after the Second World War?
Yeah. We had TV, and people wanted everything modern. And the suburbs came, so the downtown areas of cities started to deteriorate.
Okay.
And we lost most of them.
Okay, and then I guess also the issue with this was a single-screen theater, so in order to generate more revenue, you mentioned at a later point in time in the 1970s, they converted it to actually 3 screens in here, is that correct?
Yes, yes, I did.
And what I find very interesting and also sad at some point is that this building was threatened with demolition. Is that correct? Somebody actually wanted to tear this place down?
Yep, in the 1980s, this area had seen better days. It was shop-worn. They were looking for new plans, and the plan was to build office buildings. So Loews sold this building to a developer who was going to tear it down for an office complex. A lot of people in Jersey City didn't want to see that happen. In fact, people from all over New Jersey, New York, and other parts of the country came in at some point in time to speak to our city council to save this theater, because they know there are so few of these left. And as a resource here in Journal Square, revitalizing Journal Square, which is a hub in Jersey City, was very important to us, and saving a Loews could be an anchor for revitalization. So it was a multi-pronged campaign to save the theater.
Great, and so is that how the Friends of the Loews Theater was formed?
Yes. Yeah, we formed technically in 1987 with a trip to the planning board with about 200 people.
Right, so a real grassroots effort from the community and the people in the region to really preserve this this unique landmark and use it as a means of revitalization for the community.
Yeah,
that's great. You mentioned earlier about the studios owning theaters at I guess historically in the 1920s and 30s. So Marcus Loew, his company, produced the movies and then also owned the theaters. Now, is that some sort of monopoly? Was there at some point in time where that ceases to exist?
Yes, the early 1950s, there was an antitrust suit brought against the huge mega corporations, and they had to divest their interest in they either could make the films or exhibit the films. They couldn't do both. There were a lot of independent filmmakers by then, and they had no venues in which to show their films. So that became a real problem. So of course, MGM was the studios, and the Loews company actually eventually went into hotels and a lot of other different businesses, and eventually they sold the theater chain to the Tisch family and then to Sony, so it's no more Loews. But at that time, the whole philosophy of making art, including the building, had changed. This became just a place to exhibit movies, so they didn't want the fancy stuff. It cost too much to upkeep, which is why a lot of the buildings were torn down.
So what are some of the programs that happen here today? What's the movie palace used for today?
This palace is used for community events, things like student art shows and those kind of community events. We do weddings and banquets in the lobby. On the stage we have some live entertainment. We have Bright Eyes, who is an independent recording artist, and Beck performed here, as well as Patti LaBelle. And we also show classic film on a monthly basis.
Great, great. And so we're here in the lobby, which is phenomenal, and the theater part is equally phenomenal. Can we go there and take a look at that as well?
Sure.
Great. So we're here in the theater, and what a phenomenal space this is. And I noticed we have this screen, but also this great stage. There's an orchestra pit behind me. So are they doing combination? Are there movies and other performances that are taking place here?
Yes. Originally, movie palaces were for both live shows and the movies. Back in the old days, even with the advent of talking pictures, the studio heads were not sure how long pictures were going to be liked by the people. They weren't sure, if people were going to get bored with them, but they know that people liked live productions. So they had these big stage reviews. And don't forget, back then, you only had radio, and you had these big superstars of radio, and the only place people can see them were in theaters like this.
So you said superstars. Who were some of the superstars that stood on this stage?
Well, we had Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, Burns and Allen, Jack Benny in his day, Cab Calloway. Judy Garland performed here, Duke Ellington, and there are so many more.
So, I mean, these must have been big events. I'm sure they would have drawn huge crowds to the theater at that time.
Yes, in fact, lines stretched around the block. And there were lines throughout the entire day. They had several performances during the day and evening.
Interesting. And the architecture, I mean, it really follows from the lobby right into the theater here. It looks like something that's just dripping with all kinds of ornamentation. What is the material that it's constructed out of, all this fancy ornamentation? Most
of it is plaster.
Plaster? Okay.
And they used aluminum leaf and then painted it to make it look like gold or bronze or brass. It was cheaper than gold leaf, and it lasted longer.
Great, And can we take a look at some areas that are being restored? Because I noticed some of the plaster areas being reworked and restored back to what it originally looked like. Can we take a look? Great. Patty, you were talking about the ornamentation in this theater being made from plaster, and I think we have a great example here. I mean, really adding to that movie palace experience. It just really comes out at you. So again, this is all molded plaster, and then it's painted?
Yes. It's painted. They would have put aluminum leaf on all the surfaces, and then they would glaze it to whatever effect they wanted it to have.
Okay, and then I guess here we can see a little piece that's popped out or been damaged, and actually we can see below it the plaster. So if we move down the wall here, we see a whole section here of plaster that's been missing. So this is an area that has yet to be restored then.
Right.
And what was here that cut into the wall? Yeah.
Well, in the 80s, no, 70s, 74, they turned us into 3 theaters, and they did that by making 2 small theaters here in the auditorium. They put up a wall that blocked the seats from the stage, and then they put 2 screens on the inside of those 2 walls. Put a wall down center aisle, and voila, you had 2 small theaters here.
Oh. So they literally chiseled out the plaster here and
Right, to put up
the...
a sheetrock wall, pretty much.
So it must be challenging to restore that. And I see here on the doorway, we have a section of plaster that has been restored. So tell me a little bit about how this process takes place.
Well, we worked with a restoration studio, Evergreen Studios, and they came and they gave us a workshop, and they did some of the work themselves. It's a long process, and it's like a chemistry lesson, putting some chemicals together to form a mold, which they will place right over a good section that you want to replicate, and it has to sit for a certain amount of time, and then you can pull this mold off, and it holds its shape, and it's rubbery, but it has enough stability so that when you pour the plaster into it, it'll hold that plaster and create the mold.
Great, great. And you have enough of the original pieces surviving that you can cast your duplicate pieces from. And
yeah,
so
we are very fortunate because much of the work that has been damaged you can find in a building in other places.
And so all this has to do this then is would be painted to match the other pieces then.
Yeah.
Great, great. So, Patty, this looks like something from the Wizard of Oz when he's behind the curtain, and we're not supposed to be pay no attention to that person. But what do we have here?
This is the original light board for the stage shows.
Okay.
It was pretty advanced for its time. It had presets, 5 presets, which means if Bing Crosby wanted red and blue, you preset those, and then you kick one switch, and all the lights you want come on at the same time. So you could preset for 5 different artists coming out on the stage.
So each lever then is controlling a light in a particular part of the theater.
Yes, on the stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the little globes above them that would indicate that it's on or off.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And what's the wheel for? What is that? What would that wheel do?
Well, this part of the board is for the stage lighting.
Okay.
The other side of the board is for the house lighting, the lighting in the coves and the sconces on the side. So when the show is about to start, you want to lower your house lighting and bring up the stage lighting. This does that.
Okay. Okay. And I noticed too there's an intercom system connected to this, so there was an intercom throughout the whole theater?
Throughout the entire theater. You could reach any room you wanted. The stage manager would be able to reach the ticket booth or the orchestra leader down in his dressing room, or the projection booth, which was very important because during those days they would have these light shows before the movie went on. The orchestra would play, and they would have different light effects, different colors, and then they'd start the movie. It was all orchestrated.
Ralph.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Wonderful.
Good, thank you.
Ralph Ringstadt, organist. Tell me a little bit about this piece here.
This instrument here was originally designed to play silent movies.
Okay.
And it was built by the Robert Morton Company of Van Nuys, California.
And how old is the organ?
This organ made its debut on September 28, 1929, when the theater opened. And it was one of 5 that were built by the Robert Morton Company for the 5 wonder theaters that were built by Marcus Loew in the 1920s.
So was this the original organ to this theater?
No, this one wasn't, but that organ was removed in around 1970, and it's now installed in the Arlington Theater in Santa Barbara, California.
Okay.
This organ is a twin to the original that was here. It was one of the 5 that were built, and this one was installed in the Loews Paradise Theater in the Bronx.
So this would have been identical to what would have been here
Exactly.
in the 20s and 30s.
Right.
And so it's, correct me if I'm wrong here, this is a pipe organ then? We have pipes that are hidden within the building itself?
Right, right. There are two chambers. There's called the main, and then there's the solo, and between the two chambers you have 1,775 pipes, ranging from 16 feet long all the way down to a short pencil length. And they're arranged in 23 sets of different sounds, or 23 ranks. Plus you have xylophone, glockenspiel, chrysoglot, marimba, you have drums and cymbals and tambourine and castanets and various sound effects that were used to accompany silent movies.
So you mentioned some of these sound effects. So if we're talking about drums, are there literally drums in those chambers that are playing?
Yes, there are. We have the real thing. Because back then you had no digital sampling. So we have bass drum and crash cymbal. And we have tambourine. We can do something like this. We have a wood drum and a tap cymbal. We have the bells, various types of bells. We have a glockenspiel. We have xylophone. We have a marimba. What these were designed to do is basically, they were a cost control device for an orchestra. So instead of hiring an orchestra with all the financial and logistical problems, these things were invented by a guy named Robert Hope Jones, who was an English immigrant. He was a telephone engineer by trade, and a theater owner would buy one of these and depreciate it over several years and hire one guy to play all the showings of a silent movie. So.
And I noticed too, it's on this pedestal in the orchestra pit here. So does this literally come up out of the pit, out of the floor? This maneuvers
Yes, yes, as the sun would rise over the Atlantic. And it's also, which is rare for these types of installations, this is also on a turntable. So this whole console will turn almost 180 degrees. So it's a very dramatic effect when it's rising out of the pit as the console turns. And all those are controlled by these buttons which are here. Currently they're not hooked up yet, but they will be, so that you can go up or down and you can rotate left or right.
And so this was reconstructed here. Tell me a little bit about the organization that was responsible for that.
The Garden State Theatering Society was presented with an opportunity from one of our founding members, Bob Balfour, just over 10 years ago. And we bought this instrument from a private collector, and we worked out an agreement with the Friends of Loews, and this organ was then hauled over here from a warehouse outside of Chicago in 2 tractor-trailer trucks in a gazillion pieces, and we unloaded it and put it in storage for about 2 years here in the theater, and then we started rebuilding it. So about 8 years after that, this thing started playing this past July. And so all in all, it was about a 10-year process by the Garden State Theater Organ Society, which is all volunteer effort. And so we've rebuilt this thing basically to its like new opening night condition.
Great, great. So it must have been really a labor of love for this organization.
Oh, it is.
To spend all this time.
It is. You have to be a little crazy too, but it's worth the effort, as you can tell by the way it sounds.
Yeah. Can you close us out with something?
Sure, absolutely.
I'm on my way up to the top of the theater to the projection booth. Been climbing up. I lost count of how many staircases we've come up so far, but we're going to head up to the projection booth and meet Patty. So we're up here in the projection booth, and this is quite a piece of machinery here. Tell me a little bit about this piece.
Well, actually, it's a projector with a lamp house.
Okay.
It's not one piece. The lamp house is what gives the light to shine the film, And what will happen is the film will go through the projector and pass through here, and you would have a carbon arc, similar to a welder's torch, pretty much. And that would provide the light. You have a reflector on the one side here that will help reflect the light against the film. So this is a separate component. And
So we got the lamp house here.
You have the lamp
and
house.
when does this date from?
this one particularly dates from like 1934.
34, okay.
Yeah,
and is
somewhere around there.
the rest of the projector older?
Well, the rest of the projector is vintage 1920s. The projector itself would have been here, one like it would have been here when it opened in 1929. And the interesting thing about this projector is that it's hooked up to the first form of talking pictures, which is Vitaphone.
Is that what we have on the back here?
That's this piece here. It's actually a turntable. It would play a record that size, and the stylus would run from the inside out, actually. So it ran backwards from what a normal record would play. And the other interesting thing about it is it was synchronized with the film, but every once in a while it would be unsynchronized. So a really talented projectionist would know how to move the stylus over to get it back in sync.
So a projectionist really has to coordinate all the different various parts of this projector, make sure that they're operating at the same time and same sync, and make sure that the carbon rods are
not running out too, because once they get down to a certain point, you want to change them. So you have to time everything just right. They really earn their money.
Yes. And then I noticed we have some, are these a little bit later, these projectors here?
Yeah, these projectors date to the 1950s.
50s.
This lamp house, the two lamp houses on the newer projectors were found on the stage because before the theater was closed, they weren't using the stage anymore, so they just piled junk on it. And these lamp houses were in pieces down there. We're fortunate to have a board member who is an Academy Award-winning sound engineer, worked for MGM for years. And we brought these up here. He put everything back together again. They are also carbon arc projectors. The lamp houses are. And the projector itself is a German model, Kinetone projectors.
And is this the take-up reel on the bottom?
This is the take-up reel.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then so the
here.
film would be loaded onto the top there.
Loaded onto the top and run through here. So the lamp house would reflect, and then it would be taken up down here.
Okay, and must be a tremendous amount of heat coming from this lamp house. We noticed that they're vented.
Yes.
And there's a water coolant that goes through it?
That's it, just like you would have in a car. This is a water cooler. It cools the whole system.
And there's multiple projectors here. So a film, like Casablanca, how many reels of film would that be?
Normally 4 to 6 reels is an average. Film like Gone with the Wind is 13.
13 reels, really?
Yeah.
So the projectionist then has to be able to load up the other reel, and I mean, how do they know when to turn off one projector and get the other one going?
Well, if you ever watch an old movie on TV, you'll see usually in the top right-hand corner, every once in a while you'll see a dot that sort of flashes. Okay. And that's the hint to the projectionist to fire up the other carbon arc and get it ready for movement. And they know how to time it just so that when this one runs out, the other one is running and picks up. Every once in a while, though, you'll see a blank screen for a couple of seconds, and then the new one will go on.
So there's literally a little dot that comes in, and that's their cue to start getting things coordinated with the other projector then, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. And so you have these 3 projectors, and I assume they all work. They're used for the movies that are shown here?
Well, these 2 are used for the movies. The Vitaphone projector is still under repair.
Okay.
But these 2 are used on a regular basis.
And I've heard for black and white films that the carbon arc illumination, which they don't use anymore today, but the carbon arc illumination is really the best type of illumination for black and white film. It
is, because black and white, there's so many variations of grays and different tones that that the carbon arc is so bright. It's the brightest light you can get. It really brings out the striking differences in the tones.
So it's like a brilliant white color then
Yes.
that really gives the contrast with the film.
Yeah.
And there's another ancient piece of equipment sitting back here. Tell me a little bit about this piece.
This, we have two of them. They're called Brenegraphs.
Okay.
And they were not used for the movies. They were used as special effects for the stage shows.
Okay.
And it's,
I know we were talking earlier about the fact that they showed movies here, but they also had stage performances. So this would be a piece of equipment then for special effects on the stage, lighting techniques and so forth.
yeah. It could simulate rainbows and all kinds of effects back for the backdrops and.
And these are carbon arc too, right? Is that correct? Can we peek inside of
Yeah,
this?
sure.
So that's the carbon rod on the top, and I guess there's
There's a piece
other
of it
parts
here.
of the carbon rod here. And so the two would sit in there, and the arc between the two pieces would create
The spark.
Huh.
Yeah. So these were sitting in the corner here. The place is so big that they didn't really need to throw them out. So we were fortunate that they kept them.
And notice some other, I guess, effects that these projectors can create. Is that like a dissolving view or a
Yep.
way to transition to another scene or a lighting technique?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
So we're in what's called the rewind room, right? And we
Yes.
have a storage cabinet here for the Vitaphone records, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where you would have stored all the records for one film. And we do have an example of a Vitaphone record. This one is an MGM, appropriate since this was an MGM house. And you can see here the times played. You could only play it 40 times before the record would be worn out. So this one was played 5 times.
Now, I guess the storage of the film also was important in those days because the film was flammable in the 1920s and 30s, is that right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Is that what this cabinet was used for?
Yes, this was for the storage of the film reels. Each one is a separate fireproof component. And so if one would happen to catch fire, it would be contained in that chamber and the smoke would go up the flue.
And I notice here also you have classic film for some of your upcoming programs coming from the Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank, California. So tell me a little bit about what movies we have here.
Well, you're looking at, this one is Lady from Shanghai. There is Citizen Kane, The Magnificent Ambersons, and from Universal, Touch of Evil. Orson Welles Weekend.
Orson Welles, yeah. So that's Citizen Kane over there, and those.
Yes, that's Citizen Kane.
Great. And so these are movies that are rented from the modern studios?
Yes, rented from Warner Brothers and from any other studio, and they come to us, and then we prepare them by taking them off the shipping reels and putting them on a better grade reel in order to project them on the projectors. And we examine them, make sure the sprockets are okay, make any repairs we need to, and then they're ready to go.
And so a logistical question then. I forgot how many flights of steps I had to walk up to this projection booth. How did they get all this film up here? Because it looks pretty heavy.
The same way we came up, they
Really?
walked them up.
They had to lug all this film up here. Huh?
Yep.
Very fascinating. Patty, thank you very much for the tour. And for more information, people can visit the website. What's the web address?
It's lowsjersey.org.
Great. Very nice and simple. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode as we learned about the history of this great movie palace. And come along again as we travel on the History Trail.